Hit record. We're ready.
Call to order.
I can go make one if you want.
Do we need to do a roll call or?
Yeah, Michelle. Councilmember Ward,
Here.
thank you. Linda Cohn is absent. Shane Smith is absent. Mr. Bowman,
Here.
Mr. Dunning,
Present.
Beth Harston is absent, and Chair Costello. We have a quorum.
January 2023. You have any questions? New business.
We'd have to take a vote, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
All those, just all those in favor, we don't have to do a roll call.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
I'll just briefly introduce this. So what I've done in this memorandum is listed who the two officers are now. Bernie Costello is chair, and Linda is vice chair. I also looked for 100 dates. As well consideration. Now I would remind you that the third officer of the authority is the executive director, and I just serve in that role. By your pleasure, I'll continue to do that. So you need to have nominations of the chair and vice chair.
Sorry to interrupt. I can hear Brad, or I can hear Nancy really well, but I'm not hearing anybody else all that great. I don't know if there's something you can do about that, but otherwise I'll just hang out.
We can use our outside voice. That's fine, Councilman.
Yeah, if I raise my voice, can you hear me better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll be mindful of that. Sorry, guys. What I would suggest is you open nominations for chair first, followed by vice chair.
Bernie, is there any opposition to running it back?
Why not?
I entertain a motion to nominate and elect Bernie Costello as chair.
Second,
So,
Yes.
All those in favor?
aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations, Chair Costello.
second.
All those in favor? Steve?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the motion.
Oh, to,
Re-elect Linda Cohen as vice chair.
motion passes.
List 2024 budget. That you have anything you want?
I do, and I've relocated. Steve, can you hear me better now?
Yes, thank
Okay, so I'll briefly introduce the budget and then open it up for any discussion from the commissioners. You're required to adopt an annual budget for which we provide information to the Department of Local Affairs with the state. And I think you've seen this format before. So if you have any questions about the format of the budget and any of the funds and how they're allocated, our finance representative tonight, Kevin Engels, is here to answer any questions that you have. Kevin, thank you for joining us. And if there's questions, we'll be with you momentarily. And I would just outline a few things that are located in the budget. A couple of things that you've seen over the years that have been unchanged, which would be there's an annual audit that's required of the EURA. So that comes in roughly $1,000 per year. So we've left that. For the last several years, it's been at that same level. I've talked in the past about technical training for you as commissioners. The Colorado Municipal League and a couple other organizations have in the past sponsored technical training for urban renewal and downtown development authority commissioners. I've proposed to leave that in the budget, although I've not seen any training propagated in the last year or so from those organizations. We'll certainly keep our eyes open for it, sir.
Is that initiated by members or is that something CML will offer and we sign up?
It tends to be something they offer and you can sign up and go. But if you find something, if you trip across something that might be interested and relevant to your service on the board, let us know and we'll be definitely glad to accommodate that. And then a couple of things that are different. One is I would suggest that you allocate $20,000 for a professional services line item for 2024. And this is actually related to the next item that's on the agenda, which is some property disposition that we would like to explore. If any of the expenses related to that or any other administrative expenses would exceed $20,000, we would return to you for authorization for anything beyond that level. So that would be included in your budget as well. And then finally, there's an administrative fee of just over $15,000 that is new for this year. And all of the city's enterprise funds and special funds are being now charged a fee based on the amount of services that the city provides to those funds. As it relates to the EORA, this is entirely employee time. So it'd be things like my time, Nancy's time, obviously, is the most close amount of time that you would see allocated. But even next door, the city manager, I talk about ERA things with him occasionally. And then obviously our finance staff is pretty heavily involved in servicing the loans payments that come in every year from the Broadway Lofts project and some other things. Yes, Mr. Bowman?
You mentioned property disposition.
Yes, I'm going to talk about that next, but it has a budget impact for 2024. So those are the items that we would propose to include in the budget for 2024. And so we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have relative to some of the standing items that you've seen over the years. Kevin can address that. And I would be happy to address any of these 4 items that I've particularly called out this evening.
Just to be not allocating the draft budget or it's not.
We are proposing to have it within the budget for 2024 as a professional services line item. So if there are no questions, you could entertain a motion at your level.
Motion to approve.
Aye.
In favor, Steve?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Kevin.
Kevin, thank you. Appreciate your willingness to be here.
Sure, I think I'm going to hang on for the next item as well. It might impact some accounting.
Okay, of course.
That is the property transfer.
So this item is a carryover. I believe I brought this up at last year's meeting, and I have a confession, which is that our department, you may be familiar. I know Mr. Costello is very familiar with the fact that our department was largely consumed with developing our new land use code through 2023. The work and that around that was very intensive. So I didn't have the opportunity to follow through on that. So to reintroduce this, back in the 80s, the Urban Renewal Authority acquired a lot of property in the downtown core area that facilitated the 1980s, early 1990s urban renewal activities that resulted in the shopping centers that housed Big Lots and Hobby Lobby and the King Soopers. And apparently, most of the property that was associated with the Urban Renewal Authority was conveyed to either the city for streets, parks, the Greenway. Private developers obviously were acquiring some of that property. We had a complaint from a downtown property owner about the lot that's just north of the post office on Floyd and Broadway, that northeast corner, about some weeds that were in that lot. So we did some investigation. We discovered that the Urban Renewal Authority doesn't actually own that lot, but there are 3 other lots that are largely are remnants that the county says that the Urban Renewal Authority actually owns. We did some title work and we confirmed that. So 2 of the lots are about 44,000 square feet each that are located either in or adjacent to Englewood Parkway, right on the north side of the Broadway Loft project. So if you're familiar with One Barrel, the restaurant, that's where those 2 are. The 3rd lot is literally in the middle of the Dry Creek Greenway, just south of Hamden, kind of at the terminus of where Lincoln Street would be. So in talking with the city attorney, our idea was to finally work on conveying those lots to the requisite property owners. The little one that's in Little Dry Creek is less than 500 square feet. It's literally a foot or 2 feet one way and a couple hundred feet the other way. It's surrounded by city property now. And so it doesn't have really any complexity to it. So we would propose to work with our city staff to get that conveyed through the council action pretty quickly. So sometime this year, we will try to do that. The other 2 are a little bit more complicated in my discovery, because I was starting to look in some of the county records, some of the county mapping, and I am not clear where those properties are. I initially thought they were entirely within Englewood Parkway. So that would be another conveyance to the city, fairly straightforward. Our city attorney has a little bit different take on that one, in that she wants some assurance that given some of the past uses surrounding that area, that environmentally, the city would not be inheriting a liability. So part of what we would like to do is have some type of cursory investigation environmentally to confirm that those 2 lots would not have any type of underlying environmental issues. So that would be one part of that expense that you just authorized in the budget. The second one is we need a survey of those 2 lots to confirm what real estate they actually occupy. Because if they occupy the right of way, that's pretty easy for us to continue. If they occupy a part of the Broadway Lofts project, then we need to reach out to those adjacent property owners and work with them to figure out what is the best way to convey this property and how that makes sense to do so. Our proposal for that simple property in Little Dry Creek is to convey that at no cost to the city, because it could probably be pretty straightforward. The other would be if those other 2 lots, again, about 4,000 square feet each, and they're adjacent to each other. If they're environmentally clear and all of that, we would also recommend that we convey that to the city at no trade in terms of value. It's a little bit different when it comes to private property owner. So my recommendation would be that if we do have a private property owner that's involved, that we would convey them to that property owner, either in whole or part, depending on what the survey tells us, and ask for reimbursement of the costs of the ERA to do that, but not for any real estate consideration, because there's really no value in those lots, being that they're developed, they're pretty stable. There's no transaction that would make sense from a real estate perspective there. So I would be happy to answer any questions, but that's the idea between an environmental check, a survey of those 2 lots, not the 3rd lot, and any type of outside legal or any other expenses that we could have. That was the basis of the request of that professional services line item in the budget that you just approved. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Survey work needs to be done on that property. That over is there any legal?
I don't believe so. I think we can handle all of that internally with our public works department if we need to confirm the location. But we've already confirmed that it is, in fact, completely surrounded by City of Englewood property now.
Will the environmental survey need to be done on the Englewood Parkway lots if we determine that it is private property?
Probably.
What would be a private?
Well, what I'm
property owner-
planning to. I'm sorry,
Sorry.
go ahead, sir.
What would be a private property owner's incentive to accept? Aren't we just asking them to take on a liability that we would otherwise have for things like snow removal and such?
Well, I think they probably are already under the assumption that they have it. And my first action actually is going to be to contact those property owners to see if this is an error by the county. And if there is a clear title, and we're done with this. And then we're done. So that could be the easiest outcome.
Is there any potential that it would impact the property owner?
The King Supers?
Yeah.
No, I'm quite confident that it would either be in the right of way and to the south. It's definitely a part of the sidewalk because that sidewalk is I think it's a 12-foot sidewalk. So it's quite expansive in that area. So I'm very confident that part of it's in that sidewalk. And that should be the property for that. So they're probably already maintaining it as it is.
You're assuming that they have ownership of that land.
Correct. So I don't think we'll have I would not expect that we'd have any type of conflict or resistance.
You need a motion to approve that.
Yes, that would be helpful. I'm sorry?
We've already approved.
Well,
the fund.
you've approved the fund, so I don't think you need to have a motion on this. If you just want to give me the high sign to, yeah, no, we don't need a motion on this one. Thank you, Nancy. We'll just proceed and we'll keep you updated. And obviously, if there's a transaction at some point in this year, we'll convene board to do that part of that, and then we'll get it in front of the city council.
Anything in addition on director's choice?
I don't believe so. Actually, I could give you a very brief update of where we stand with City Center. As you know, City Center is a very complicated piece of real estate to try to figure out in terms of its future, but we're continuing to work on that. I think you were aware, I made you aware last year that our development partner SKB pulled out in October of 22. And since then, we've been working with the underlying servicer that took over the debt on the property and has kind of been the caretaker on the private side. That's called L&R Partners out of Miami. And we've been back and forth with them over the course of months around how to try to position this property. And at one point in early part of 2023, in mid-February of 2023, we convened an all-day Saturday session between the City Council, the Downtown Development Authority, and the two principals that we work with from L&R to talk about what could be a couple of alternatives that would be the basis of a national marketing effort to try to get the private sector re-engaged on the site. So we did that in February. I think all the parties thought that was a really good outcome and good investment of time. Just for relationship building alone, I think it was helpful for the City Council to kind of understand where L&R particularly is coming from. So we worked on that over the course of several months and put together a marketing package in cooperation with CBRE, which is L&R's broker, and that went out. And that was, I think, an interesting process because there were several dozen groups that looked at the property. Dan Peremba, our redevelopment manager, and I met with probably half a dozen groups that were interested in taking a look at the property, kicking the tires. L&R obviously had a lot more interaction than we did with potential buyers. At the end, they received between 3 and 5 offers, and none of the offers were acceptable to their major bondholder. So they had a decision point at that point in time, which was late fall of last year of 23. And originally they told us, okay, we're kind of done with this. What we're going to do is we're going to shift back to our base scenario, which is we're just going to try to lease up the vacancies, do a little cosmetic improvements here and there, and sell it as an existing shopping center. And so we assumed that for about a month, but then they very quickly came back and said, well, wait a minute, we're still wanting to think about the redevelopment scenario. So that's kind of where we are now. With them, we're still working through ways to try to position the property for a private transaction, to assume the lease and to acquire the property. And that has a lot of implications about what the city gets back in return. So we're working through that. We're actually scheduled for an executive session with the City Council next Tuesday to talk to them about where we are now and some of the choices that the city has relative to the future in the next couple of months. of trying to go forward with LNR on a basis that could have, I can't get into the beef of it, but different scenarios for the city's role going forward. And so that's kind of where we are. Obviously, our preference, our strong preference is that there's a transaction with a redevelopment focused owner versus somebody who would come in and just operate the shopping center because one, that's a much lower value to LNR's bondholder. Two, it really doesn't absolve the city of any risk another 3 or 5 years from now that we're right back to having a lot of vacancies. It's not very productive. And we have to do this all over again at some point. We're just kicking the can down the road. I think LNR sees the value of sticking to trying to find some longer term solution. So we're hanging our hats on that with them. That's where we are. And that's all I have.
Actually, okay, it sounds like they've been negotiating or discussing in good faith. Would you?
I would say yes, but I think it's been challenging in terms of the different shifts in their priorities. Because we've been having assumptions on one path and then that path would kind of deviate a bit. And we'd have to adjust to that and then we come back. And so, you know, but I think that's the nature of the business that they're in. I mean, they have this singular bondholder who is wanting to have as much value that they can get out of the transaction, which is fair.
This month, last. Based on market.
That's right. That's right.
Thanks for that, Brett.
My first choice, if anybody have anything they'd like to add? Well, in that case, I would call for the rest of the adjourned meeting.
Adjourn.
Thank you all for your time. Steve, I hope you feel better.
I hope you feel better,
Thanks.
Steve. Thanks for
All
joining.
right. Thank you for
I'm in
your
the home
time.
stretch.
All right. Take care of yourself.
You're in lovely parks.
Yeah.
How like.
And it looks warm.
Yeah, it's nice and green.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Kevin, thanks again.